Hello, church, and welcome to our new podcast studio / digital media studio. We are so excited. We are going to be trying something new, and this is week 1. Andrew, do you want to tell us a little bit of what we're doing here?
Well, Mallorie has taken over, really created a new position for digital faith formation at the church. And we wanted to do this for a lot of reasons, partly because it's a lot how people connect, and it's a lot how people check out a church that they're interested in going to. And it's also true that a lot of our church interacts at least sometimes digitally, either watching the sermon or the entire worship online, or just on our Facebook page throughout the week, or watching Karen on Wednesdays with her midweek moment. So we just wanted to do more of that, and I'll just say I'm really glad to be working with Mallorie. She's had a vision for what she's wanted to do, and there's a lot more to come, and I'm really excited to be beginning this process. But please do give us some feedback if you enjoy this, so we know how to steer all the things that we're up to these days.
Absolutely. I think it's very true. Online services and online faith formation has become very needed, especially since COVID. You know, a lot of churches were doing that before, but once COVID hit, everybody kind of had to relearn the game. And I think it's cool that we've kept a little bit of that as we've come out of the COVID world. So like he said, please give us some feedback. Let us know what you like, some things that maybe you'd like to see. There will be a little bit of homework, I guess you could call it, at the end, because this week and for the weeks to come, we're going to be recapping the sermon and answering some of the questions that came up, at least in my brain, as Andrew was preaching on Sunday. And then in the future, we'd love to hear your questions that you have as well. So welcome to the Unveiled Podcast. So to kick things off, I would like to know a little bit of what your thought process was behind the Woven series as a whole.
Well, it came from a couple of different ideas. One was just looking at our church calendar. So after Easter, we had already planned to have a day school Sunday, and it's Mother's Day, and we also have Pentecost, and I was trying to think of a sermon series that could go over these types of things and what they might all be related to. And I was thinking about them in terms of relationships in our life. And so I knew I wanted to try to cover these areas in one worship series. And then just, I think it's a topic a lot of people talk about, but it does feel like there's a lot of isolation as we've moved from a lot of places where we have face-to-face interactions to a very busy life where a lot of things are digital like this. I felt like that talking about relationships are really important. And then additionally, Christian relationships and ones founded on agape love, that's still, even though it's 2,000 years later, a very radical concept. And so I think it's something that I felt like the church could use. And so, we've for the next 4 weeks, we're going to be talking about different kinds of relationships in our lives. We kind of began by talking about our relationship with God and being woven to God. And then we're going to talk about family, children, grandchildren, and then we're talking about significant partners and spouses, and then ultimately on Pentecost Sunday about the church. And so I hope that people will connect in. One of the things I realized was that you have to do this in a way that speaks to people, but also knowing that everyone's situation is different.
Right.
Some people have children, others do not. Some people are raising grandchildren. Some have families that are woven together in remarriage. There are so many different ways that we do these days. Foster families with adopted kids. There's just so many ways. And then at our church, one of the things that we have seen a lot is we have folks that are not related by any blood, but who are really there for each other and come to church together, check on each other every day in the week, care for one another, and are woven together in like family, even if they are not at all related by blood. So there's just a lot of relationships that we wanted to talk about.
I think that's one of my favorite parts of church, honestly, is, going with your family is amazing, and it's one way to really grow your own family, is growing together in faith and growing closer to God like a triangle. But one of my favorite parts about church is finding that chosen family that you choose, that you consider family, people that your kids call aunt and uncle, even if they really aren't blood related to you, but that you've chosen as your family and chosen to do life with. That's one of my favorite parts of church.
Well, and you may not know this, but Mallorie has a crew of folks that she's very close to, families that are interwoven here at the church that do a lot together and support one another, and it's a beautiful thing to watch from the outside. It's really a life-giving part of our church, and I see that all over the place. And in our church. Yeah,
thank you. Talking about God's love, which we tend to do a lot at a church, but talking about God's love and agape is and you said it yesterday, agape is a complicated thing to understand and to even comprehend. And I loved the way that you said, sometimes you're in a fight with a child, and anybody who's had children or been around children know that there's not really fighting with a child, right? Like, at a certain age, they believe that they are right, even if yes, your shoes are on the wrong feet, even though you are telling me very adamantly that they're not. But when you're getting in these heated fights, as you want to call them, sometimes you just want to smile. With my daughter especially, sometimes because she's a lot like me, I just want to hug her and be like, you know what, I right now I am so frustrated with what you were telling me and the fact that you will not put your shoes on and head to the front door, but I just could cover you in hugs and kisses. And so agape, when you kind of put it towards that, was a little better, it was a little easier for me to understand. But what advice would you give to someone who is having a hard time believing this idea that God loves us because God loves us, not God loves us because we are this, good person, this kind person. God loves us because God loves us. What advice would you give to someone who's having a hard time with that concept?
Well, I think growing in God's love is the purpose of our life, right? And growing to love like God loves. That's in many ways what Christian perfection is about. And so it is something that is not easy. Yeah. And in many ways, it's moving out of the agendas of the world into God's agenda in terms of love. And that's a lot. And I think I took a big step forward when I had children, because that was the first sort of love that approached that for me, and that you can want your kids to do differently. And I suppose as they become adults, this might change, but particularly with little kids, you almost know that anything they're doing is the result of you. And, it's especially very little, where you're like, they really only have 2 or 3 people to model how to do things off of, and they have all half of my genes. So
that's why we go to church. We have people at church that can help us with that.
That's a good point, and a very important point. But also just this sort of the closest thing to, well, my kids, and I don't know if Avery's gotten to this stage yet, but at a certain stage, I think all kids drill their parents on why they love them, because they are themselves trying to figure out. One of my children just recently has started giving us a quarter or candy if we do things that particular child likes. And I think he's trying to reinforce our behavior like that. And but he's trying to figure this out, right? About why do people like each other? Why do people love each other? And I think even as young as children, they struggle with this idea that we just love them because of they exist, right? And we love them, and that's and it's true that might be, for me, was the first human relationship that was at least a glimpse of, I think, how God operates. And a lot of the reasons, I think the metaphor of God as our Father is really an important way of understanding God, is it's kind of that. And I think, in my marriage, marriage starts off, and there's lots of different kinds of love in marriage, but the longer we go, and I think the more intentional and more grounded we are in our faith, and really I think that the hope for all marriage is that it will come to have that foundational agape character too, and because otherwise it's all conditional, it's all agenda, and and so and that self-sacrificial love that's at the heart of how God does business. So I think, to answer your question, it's a lifelong process, and what I love about church, and our church is a really great place for this, is that you can find people at different points along the way.
Yeah.
And this isn't just talk. Like, I have met people, many people. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, where you just go, oh, that's what that looks like. That's what that looks like, to be a person who has that kind of agape heart, and who loves and is giving and is building up others, and when you see it and you can recognize it, that's far more powerful than like understanding the concept of it. It's just knowing it's something that you can grow towards, and that God can grow in you. And when you talk with those people, they will talk about the grace of God. They will talk about the love of God, and so we're all walking that journey, but it is not without a destination. We are moving towards it.
Well, thank you so much for recapping your sermon with us. I think this is going to be a really awesome series in general, and then just an awesome segment that we do for weeks to come. So, like I said, we do have some homework for you guys. After the sermon each week, if you have a question that you'd like for us to recap a little bit, go ahead and send me an email with your question, and I'll put it down here at the screen. And let us know what you'd like to hear us talk about, any questions that you might have from the sermon, and we'd love to get to those. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you then.